Chicago has been probably the most active city in the United States in support of the museum. We've come to the luncheon since there was a luncheon. This event is the event that this entire community has coalesced around for 2 decades now.
The museum couldn't be more relevant because it's a reminder of the past. That is only part of it. It's the fact that things that happened years ago can happen again.
Look at Syria, look at all over the world where, cleansing is taking place as we speak.
Until we can really say never again, and the world means it, the mission of the museum is so very, very important.
While we can't be together at the Sheraton,
we're still going to gather in the same spirit.
At a time when our voices need to be amplified more than ever, perhaps not being restrained by the walls of a ballroom this year is a good thing.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today. And a special thanks to our past chairs and honorees. I'm Kathy Hess-Tallering, and my husband Ken and I are honored to follow in their footsteps as chairs of this year's Chicago Luncheon for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. While we are physically apart this year, we come together with a deep understanding of the importance of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum.
At this critical moment, the museum's work to educate new generations about the dangers of anti-Semitism and alert the national conscience to lessons of the Holocaust has never been more vital.
If we are committed to ensuring never again, it's up to us to be sure that young people, in fact, every new generation, learn the lessons.
We are so proud that the Chicago Luncheon is the largest fundraising event for the museum in the country. We thank our corporate chairs, Heather and Ben Scher, and our vice chairs, Rachel and David Sternberg, Lori and Todd Lustbader, and Kim and Perry Schwachman for being part of our 2020 leadership team. And thank you to the museum staff for creating this virtual gathering. While the format might be different, this is our opportunity to show our commitment and support to the museum.
More than any other year that I can remember, this is the time to give.
Please make your gift today, and please give generously.
We need you. This museum needs you.
As the daughter of Holocaust survivors, the museum is especially personal to our family. So too is this year as we mark the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II and the world's confrontation with the searing truth of the Holocaust. Let's watch.
It is an honor and privilege to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II in Europe with you. Really, the end of 2 wars. A military one over territory in Germany's genocidal war against the Jews.
Irvin Haber was on a transport from Malines, Belgium to Auschwitz on August 4th, 1942, when he threw 2 letters from the train. Dear Finder, I am a Jewish boy who was caught in Brussels. I am part of a transport of Jewish children who are deported to Poland. We are watched by the Gestapo and not allowed to write, and I am trying to throw this out of the train. I thank you from my heart that you are doing this good deed to my old grandmother and little sister who do not know where I am. Irvin Haber was gassed to death upon his arrival.
Dear family, no fever anymore. Finally, we go. Very weak, but full of courage. My beloved children are next to me. Johanna and her sons were killed shortly after their arrival to Auschwitz.
We are headed for Metz to rejoin Mama. Everything is okay. We will arrive this evening. We hope to find Mama. Be strong. We will see each other soon. No one in the family survived.
My dearest darlings, we have just passed Toulouse at 12 noon. You can imagine how I feel. I am happy and glad that I don't have you two, my darlings, here with me. In God's name, be brave and calm. Heartfelt kisses to you. Your Mama.
Wilma and Kurt Grunwald and their 2 sons were deported to Auschwitz. Eventually, the oldest son, who was handicapped, was selected for death. In a state of mind that is unimaginable to us Vilma decided to voluntarily accompany him to the gas chamber so that he wouldn't go through this ordeal alone. You, my only and dearest one, do not blame yourself for what happened. It was our destiny. Take care of the little golden boy and don't spoil him too much with your love. Have a fabulous life. We must board the trucks. Into eternity, Vilma.
We would be the fathers, the teachers, educators of the future. But no, we shall certainly not live to see it.
We note a proof of guilt which is useless for ourselves. The trace should be thrown like a stone under the wheel of history in order to stop it.
We may now die in peace. We fulfilled our mission. May history attest for us.
In the spring of 1945, American troops in Germany and Austria came upon concentration camps at Buchenwald, Dachau, Nordhausen, Mauthausen, and Ohrdruf. The soldiers saw the camps with their own eyes, and the truth was undeniable. The things I saw beggar description. The visual evidence and verbal testimony of starvation, cruelty, and bestiality were overpowering.
Inside the fence, there were hundreds and hundreds of people crowding. I was 13 years old. I could worm my way through them to get to the front.
We heard a voice telling us, "You are free." It's undescribable, unbelievable. The first minutes, it was magic. It was a miracle. It was a cocktail of happiness.
I think I remember shouting and waving, and then I collapsed unconscious.
These people were scheduled to die, and the preparations were so efficient from the standpoint of disease and starvation. There isn't much that can be done about it.
So hungry. I remember being so hungry. We were so isolated, cold, abandoned by the world.
A little girl, doubled with the gnawing pains of starvation, cried pitifully for help. Everywhere we turned, the pathetic cry of "Wasser, Wasser" met our ears.
So that was the first time I saw American young soldiers feeding us, dressing us. They were wonderful. They were the best people that I can imagine.
Dear Mother, anything you hear about that place, you can believe. It is not propaganda.
It's all the truth, as I saw it with my own eyes.
A sergeant whose mother and father disappeared into a Nazi concentration camp 3 long years ago turned his head and remarked in a tear-choked voice, "And Hitler wanted to rule the world."
To Johanna,
Erwin,
Vilma,
David, and all the others, we will never forget. We pledge to you that we will make your mission ours.
When the museum opened, the Holocaust was living memory. We can't let it become distant history. We built the museum at a particular moment. We planted a flag. We put a powerful, enduring marker here on America's National Mall. The memory is now in our hands, in your hands. The challenge is, what are we going to do with it? Memory was never meant to be contained in this building. It was meant to be unleashed as a force for change. Anti-Semitism and hate didn't start with the Holocaust, nor end with it. They are relentless problems, and we too must be relentless. Because the world always changes, but human nature never does. Right now, we face a perfect storm: rising hate, growing social media, declining history education. So just when we're giving human beings more power than ever before to influence and be influenced, we're not preparing them for this unprecedented responsibility. That's why history matters, especially Holocaust history. And that's why we're building something new, a global digital enterprise. COVID temporarily closed the museum, but it opened new possibilities. It changed how we work,
Put questions in the chat or raise your hands.
how we built the collection,
We've also had people reach out to us through the online programming.
convened scholars,
The specific connection to the archival material we've looked at on liberation.
and reached policymakers.
The purposes of the legislation, it is to stop violence against the citizenry.
Meeting this challenge has made us better and stronger. And we're serving more people now than ever before. And nowhere has the impact been greater than in the shift to an all-digital educational enterprise.
How would we suggest teachers use the timeline activity for remote instruction when teaching online?
So teachers could assign students to read a specific individual profile
The
card.
most important audience for the museum in terms of education is youth. So when we had to go from in-person experiences with youth and with educators who reach youth into remote learning environments, we were more than thrilled to be able to rely on what had been built here, what had been invested in here at the museum. We had digital collections, we had digital educational resources, but we had to think about how to make those appropriate and adapt them for these remote learning environments.
Eastern Florida State College would like to express our gratitude.
Just a huge thank you for all of the resources for myself and for the teachers across Tennessee.
Regularly reaching out to me as a faculty member and asking what I needed, what they could do for me.
Lessons and unit plans, Facebook Live sessions.
I took advantage of the Ask a Librarian sessions. I found the Experiencing History portal really very helpful.
The live digital lectures was a great way for us to stay connected.
And I found myself looking for those types of resources to assign to students.
Students with uneven internet connections dispersed across the state could nonetheless continue to access high quality content.
And that for us was really exciting because we knew that that was immediate needs. But we also wanted to think about, is it just for the moment, or can this help us in the long run? For example, in the summer, we would normally bring 250 teachers to the museum to learn about content and pedagogy. When we asked those teachers, would you come if we did it in a virtual format, they said yes.
Today, I welcome you to a very different conference than the one we all envisioned.
Word spread, and before we knew it, we had over 1,000 educators, 4 times as many were able to attend. And when we heard that there were teachers from Bethel, Alaska, Mobile, Alabama, and Paint Lick, Kentucky, we knew that we had achieved something really special.
Educators from all around the world came together to receive quality Holocaust education from the museum.
I don't know what I would do during this time without you.
These were all resources that made a difference in teachers' daily lives. And it also has made a difference in how we move forward as teachers.
One of the earliest transitions that we made with our programs was for the program that invites local youth in DC to become ambassadors for the museum.
Ambassadors, I'm not the only one who has congratulations and well wishes. Our guest speaker served on the museum council, but you may know him better as a 2-time NBA champion, Mr. Ray Allen.
I want to take this moment to say I'm amazed by you all. I'm encouraged. I'm thankful. And each one of you young people has an opportunity to determine what our futures are going to be.
My name is Rose Bohm, and I'm a sophomore at Washington.
My name is Ativa D'Souza, and I'm a rising junior at the Home.
We have all learned so much.
We are the leaders the museum has built.
Make us want to go out and create an impact on our own personal communities.
We have an obligation to speak out and stand up against hate and bigotry in this world.
As we go forward, we're going to be thinking about how we maximize these new remote tools in ways that complement our in-person successes. But whether we're engaging remotely or in person, the museum is going to continue to engage leaders who are so central to the health of our democracy.
Welcome to week 3 of Crisis Leadership and National Security.
Since the spring, we've run programs for international military officers, senior level government and military leaders, as well as police, prosecutors, lawyers, and judges.
It would be impossible not to bring it up, right? It is what is on everyone's mind right now.
We create meaningful remote educational experiences for our audiences, and it's only going to enhance our capacity to lead not only nationally, but also globally. We're constantly listening. We're constantly off kilter in the sense that we know the world is changing around us and we have to listen and we have to be ready to respond, but the challenge is great. The museum has met this moment, but our work isn't done.
History is a lesson and a warning. It can also be a source of hope. When people look back on the Holocaust, they often ask, what would I have done? Our job now is to get them to ask, what will I do? And we need your help.
The work that we have just seen is made possible because of very, very generous donors like you. I'm Jill Weinberg. I'm the Midwest Regional Director of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and I have been so blessed to know and work so closely with many, many, many of you. Today, I get to present the museum's National Leadership Award to one very extraordinary, wonderful donor in our community, Mally Rutkoff. Mally is a true leader, devoting herself to every single organization that she has gotten involved with. I have seen and admired her work for decades. Her dedication to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum has been clear from day one. In the earliest years, she and her late husband, Alan, and their friends co-chaired a trip to the museum, bringing all their young children to see what this extraordinary place was about. Mally deepened her involvement by launching and leading our Children of Survivors effort, both locally and nationally. For those of you who know Mally, you know her humble nature and her very big heart. This is an extraordinary, wonderful combination. Mally, you embody the museum's motto, what you do matters. We thank you for all you do, and I am so proud to present to you the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum's National Leadership Award. Congratulations, Mally.
Thank you, Jill, and everyone at the museum. I am deeply honored to receive this National Leadership Award. I will cherish it and the recognition always. I am the daughter of Esther Schnatowski-Zoberman, survivor of Auschwitz, and Norman Zoberman, who survived the war by eluding the Nazis in Poland and Russia. While my brother Harry and I always knew our parents of blessed memory were Holocaust survivors, they could not bring themselves to share the horrors they lived through. The little we knew was not told to us, it was what we overheard. This is a picture of my mother identified by the Nazis as A15779. My mother passed away when I was just 19, before I had the chance to ask her the many questions I had. As some of you know, the museum's researchers have helped me learn about my parents' experiences. Here you see the document the museum found tracing my mother's movement throughout the Holocaust. I was stunned when I first saw it. One word stood out to me, Kratzau. I had seen this word before. I went to my mother's jewelry box, where I hold dear scraps of paper simply because they're in her handwriting. And there it was, Kratzau, the place and date of her liberation. Just 2 months ago, the museum found another part of our family history. My father's signature on his entry card to the displaced persons camp at Wexlar. To see this was beyond words. The museum's work to rescue the evidence and to make the collection of records accessible is invaluable to scholars and to families like mine. Like other children of survivors, I grew up surrounded and inspired by people with remarkable resilience, strength, and courage to go forward after their incomprehensible losses. The museum carries their legacies, along with those of the heroic liberators and the millions of victims who did not survive. Thank you for your generosity, for sharing your passion for the museum with me, and for honoring me in this very special way.
Congratulations, Mally. I'm Edna Friedberg, a historian and senior program curator at the museum here in Washington. We're sad that we can't be at the Chicago luncheon in person this year, but my colleagues know I always joke that all roads lead to Illinois. It's my home state. It's where Derek is enrolled in graduate school at the University of Chicago, and we're very pleased to join you even if it is virtual. So, hi Derek, good to see you.
Hi Edna, thanks for having me. It's really good to talk to you.
Let's start at the beginning. To most people who are watching today, you're a new face, you're a new name. Let's start a little with your background. How'd you start out on this journey?
Sure. I grew up among one of the leading families of the white nationalist movement in the United States that by the time that I came along, both of my parents had already created the first white power community online and the first website for white nationalists online that in some ways they are responsible for the movement itself. Like my dad helped popularize the term white nationalism, and his closest friend growing up was David Duke, who went on to win legislative office in Louisiana and became an international figure for American white supremacy. And I was born into a sense that this was really their calling and their cause, and I was fully bought into the ideology and advocated for it and helped support it.
And your involvement in Stormfront, in the movement, in the website, in your radio show, this was all as a teenager, a young teen, and in high school, right?
Yeah, starting from, I think about the age of 11, I started going to conferences with my dad, like, actively asking if I could participate, if I could travel with him to these hotel banquet rooms where people would stand up and give speeches about race and anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial. And I started giving media interviews and building my own website and trying to be engaged and active and figure out the best way that they could move forward.
Didn't you work with your father, in fact, to kind of like erase some of the more alienating symbolism? Because some of it is about packaging, for lack of a better word, a way to make it palatable to someone.
Yeah, there's a dualism also within white nationalism. People who believe that you can create political change by electing local politicians all over the country. And for them, figuring out the right messaging is just essential. That was the side that my family was mostly engaged in.
Can you help us, by the way, for a terminology perspective? Is there a distinction between white nationalism and white supremacy? Are they're just kind of thrown around? Are they equivalent? Are there differences?
It somewhat depends on who you ask, but there is some consensus around using white nationalism to talk about the actual social movement of people who meet and who try to come up with media campaigns or field candidates or advocate for segregation, for policies that hurt communities of color, that are actively engaging in a social movement and a sort of a radical political movement. And white supremacy then can refer to the broader society, more general racist ideas.
I'll say, in speaking to you previously, you helped me in a way that I had not understood before to think about the ways that this might be an attractive worldview. Could you share some of that with us today, please?
I think that is sort of encapsulated in the way that white nationalists are so focused on themselves and their own movement. They'll talk constantly about their need to fight for others and their need to stand up against the forces of evil. And that sense of purpose and drive and camaraderie that comes from those sort of events it's the entire world.
So it's really the embrace of a community, this feeling of, as you said, of purpose and also defensiveness, right? Of trying to be protective.
Yeah, a sense of threat. I think it is an ideological movement, so there are some core beliefs. Foremost among them is anti-Semitism and a belief in a global Jewish conspiracy to annihilate white people. But also a lot of things about race being biological and IQ and crime statistics being predicted by race. And you have to buy into all these things to be a part of this ideological activist movement. I think it's important to understand within that worldview, there's this very strong belief that my family and other activists within the white nationalist movement have, that they are continuing the American legacy, that this country was founded as a white supremacist nation, that it was founded in slavery, that it was founded in segregation.
I think it's very tempting to think about white nationalism only as a very, very fringe, violent movement like the Tree of Life shooter or someone like that, when in fact probably the vast majority of people don't do criminal activity.
There's no firm line between those two sides of it. There are people in this movement, my family was largely central to this, who thought that they could create the right message and politically affect the country in pushing it toward in racist directions. And there is a radical anti-system component of this movement that believes all the same things, except for that there is no mainstream political solution. And that is where these outbursts of violence against Jewish and communities of color happen. They believe the same things. They identify who are the threats to America, and they identify what terrible futures they think they're trying to avoid, and then they come to different conclusions about how they're going to get there. In the case of my family, we could always hold up our hands every time acts of violence happen, because technically on our website it was illegal to advocate violence, it was illegal to advocate anything against the law, you'd be banned. And so therefore when people went out and committed mass violence against the people that we said didn't belong here, we could do a media circuit and say that person was deranged, that person was a lone wolf. And to this day, my family and other people advocating this sort of political white supremacy say they have no culpability.
Help me unpack this a little. Where do Jews fit into this worldview versus other people of color or other so-called races? What is their place in the orbit?
White nationalists talk about their hatred of Jews as much, if not more, than they talk about their belief in race and their desire for global segregation. There is almost no white nationalist movement without this fundamental idea that Jewish people in the world are actively engaged in a global conspiracy to embrace immigration. This belief that Jewish people hate quote unquote white people. It's always anti-Semitism that is at the center of this whole ideology.
Tell us about when and how this shifted in your life. You renounced it, but that's not the kind of thing that happens, boom, overnight. What were some of the triggers for you?
It was years in this small liberal arts college that is the whole nexus. And I do want to emphasize, though, that it was years. Everyone in my family went to college. And a big part of that was so you could be a better white nationalist, because there are credentials that society expects, and you need to be a better arguer and writer. And to be clear, I really showed up at college not expecting or hoping for anybody to change my mind. I thought white nationalism was irrefutable, and I wanted to go to become better at white nationalism, even if I didn't really buy into academia. But the real experience was of a change of who mattered. There was a lot of facts, a lot of debates, a lot of arguments, and after many years of the experience, I ultimately had to renounce it. But if you really want to crystallize the most short version of my experience, and what I think is probably universal to what we mean when we say somebody really changed their beliefs, is I expanded the circle of the connections and the people who were important to me, who I considered, who I listened to, and who I felt some kind of responsibility for.
Did people know who you were? Did they know your background?
So that first semester at college, nobody knew my background. Nobody confronted me, consequently. I had built all these relationships with people who I was essentially lying to, because they would tell me about their experiences with hatred and racism or anti-Semitism in the world, and then I would listen, but I would not tell them about what I had advocated, what I believed up until that time.
And you were essentially outed, right?
After the first semester, I was outed. I was off campus, so I ended up watching this as a growing email thread that was larger than anything that I had ever seen posted, where there was this campus-wide debate. And the two early sides to this that formed almost immediately were people who said, we condemn him, we want to make it clear what our values are, and we are not here to make it safe or comfortable for white supremacists. And the other side of this debate was, maybe we can engage. Maybe we have this time and the space to try to convince him otherwise. That was the space that I came back to.
And it was really through personal relationships, through friendships, with people who engaged with you, who wrestled with you, who argued with you, right?
Yeah, there was one student in particular who I had gotten to know during that semester when I was there. He was observantly Jewish, and he hosted Shabbat dinners in his dorm every Friday night. And when I came back to campus, very early on, he sent a text saying, what are you doing on Friday night? And he invited me into the space. And I expected it to be kind of a one-off. I also expected to be ambushed, and I was honestly kind of prepared for it. But instead, when I got there, Matthew, who was hosting the dinners, had told everybody not to bring it up. It was just a sort of ecumenical kind of space where people from different backgrounds and people from different religious beliefs and people from just sort of the dorms next door who wanted a nice meal would come together, and that it was just their identities that proved to be a huge part of my experience, because it wasn't a one-off. I kept coming back, and I kept having these long conversations with Matthew about everything except white nationalism.
So you start returning for these Shabbat dinners. And then in 2013, you decide to do something really very public and brave. Tell us about that, please.
Right. I attended these dinners as regularly as they happened for years. The following two and a half years that I was at the campus, it was through the people I met there outside of the dinners, in particular one person, Allison Gornick, and we got to know each other slowly. And her first questions were, one, are you willing to talk about this? Because I wouldn't bring it up at dinners. And when I said yes, the question was, how can you condone this? How can you square it in your own head? And a lot of those 2 years of conversations following that was going to work on bad statistics, because white nationalists try to say that race is biological, and it's a complicated topic. Like, we talk about race is a social construct, but Allison went to work talking about what genetics means, what population groups mean. White nationalists try to say that crime is correlated and predicted by race, and it's a real abuse of statistics. And so piece by piece on the evidence front, it just dismantled my worldview. Coming to grips with people who I now had a connection to, who I cared about, who were now like a part of my community in some way, meant that the final choice was, if I don't believe this, I believe it's wrong, and I believe it is harmful, that I couldn't just go quietly into the night. And so the final choice in 2013 was to write an open letter condemning this movement and explaining how that had happened and how I'd come to that conclusion.
I mean, obviously, you love your family, and you were part of a very close-knit community. That must have been a very lonely and scary thing to do.
The really difficult thing was cutting off connections with everybody who had been important to me up until the time I was 19, 20 years old. And so it was sort of like walking out into a void. It was this breaking from everything I'd known before. And then ultimately, my parents' choice that we needed to be able to stay in touch. And so we don't talk frequently. We talk on holidays and birthdays or when there's family news, but we have the ability, which I really, really value.
I feel like you have had, in the most extreme sense, the experience of what a university campus is meant to be. It's meant to be a place of liberal ideas. And I don't mean liberal in terms of left on the political spectrum or progressive, but a place of open exchange, of debate. You sometimes talk with students today, you meet with high school students, with college students from a different place. How do you feel about that idea of the inquiry and the liberalism?
The way I think about this is I am a powerful advocate for free speech. And I also want to emphasize the importance of community and our shared values, that our values are what we make of them. We decide what we want to see in the world and we assert it. Most people on the campus had their own friend groups, had their own communities, and what they could do was assert this is not a place where we support anti-Semitism and racism. And that had an impact on me, that had an impact on the other people in the community. And if the answer to finding out that I had a white supremacist radio show was to say, well, everybody has opinions, we'll just try to talk about sports or something instead, I would not have felt like I needed to engage, like I needed to see where they were coming from. Definitely at the time, it was the Shabbat dinners and Allison who came and met me at those dinners and had these conversations dismantling my beliefs that felt like the only thing that had helped me get out and see why I was wrong and come to a place where I could condemn it and publicly assert that I had been so wrong.
What advice do you have for someone who might be watching this and says, I'm encountering white nationalism online or in person? Or are they just taking the bait if they engage?
I think we should really ask ourselves, like, what is our relationship to other people? What is our network? I think it's going to be a lot less effective if you decide you're going to go online and start fighting people in the comments section and telling them that anti-Semitism is wrong. But it's going to be a lot more effective if you realize your friend that you had a brunch with thinks some racist things about those people or that culture. You might start asking if they're willing to engage and talk to you about that. Our beliefs are rooted in our identities and our communities. To say that we believe something is at the same time to say who's important to me, who do I care about, who do I want to protect, who do I feel like if they're threatened I want to do something about it. And so if you want to change somebody's mind on something that's that important to them, you're not just trying to change the facts, you're trying to change how they see themselves and who they see themselves connected to.
I would like to turn for a second to your scholarly work. Tell us a little about what you're studying and what difference you hope it will make in the world, why it should interest people who aren't scholars.
There's something universal about people identifying who is like me and who is not like me, but that in every culture, in every place, it is completely malleable about how they're going to define that. And so when the huge divisions that we have in the world now and the consequences they have for people, it's really important, I think, that we understand that all has a history. And in the last few years, I have focused my efforts on understanding where we get these ideas of race and racism.
As a closing question, I just hoping you could reflect a little bit about what an institution like ours, like the Holocaust Museum, means to you, why you've chosen to partner with us, and why you think this history is significant for young people in the United States to learn about today.
I have chosen for years now to work with the Holocaust Memorial Museum because it is an institution that speaks to the core value of every human being. It is an institution that reminds us all that we have choices to make, that the actions that we take in the world have enormous consequences, and that each of us in our decisions are extremely important. And I don't think there is a more fundamental message than that it is not the history and the dark parts of our past, it is the choices that we have upcoming, that we are always making as individuals and as a society that are important to think about and to make as moral of a choice as we can every day.
Well, I want to thank you. I want to commend you on your journey, on your willingness and openness to share it with us, to be our partner. These conversations not only left you to a worldview, but to find the love of your life in Allison as well. So we wish you a lot of joy as newlyweds. Congratulations to you, Mazel Tov to you. And we appreciate the opportunity to have that conversation with you today, get a little glimpse.
Thanks so much.
And it is now my pleasure to introduce Holocaust survivor, our beloved museum volunteer, and Chicago's own Estelle Laughlin.
Thank you, Edna. Derek, your dedication to the brotherhood of all people is an inspiration. The history of the Holocaust will not die, as some might like. Those who remember and those who hope will see the light left by the victimized people who paid the supreme price to live by their values. We can make their suffering more meaningful if we commit ourselves to defend people from slaughter. I am so grateful to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum for giving voice to the people whose voices were silenced, and to the people who are in harm's way today. I am so grateful to everyone present here at this virtual event, and to everyone who supports the museum's effort to protect the dignity of every individual.
To Estelle and the other survivors, we pledge to keep your stories alive.
We will remember.
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 It's not enough just to care about what's happening. We must act.
I want to share some very exciting news. We have a matching gift that will match every dollar given at the same level at 50 cents on the dollar, but more importantly, every dollar of gift given above last year's gift will be matched dollar for dollar.
Your gift can count for so much more today. As you can see on the screen, there are many opportunities for you to give. Please give the most you can.
If we rise to the occasion, current and future generations will understand their roles in shaping a future different from the past. Please make your gift now.
Please give generously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We thank you all for joining us today. Be safe and be well. This concludes our program.